Even if we're making a building or a little house, we always zoom out and say, okay, what should this have the meaning in a bigger circle, you can say. And therefore we say we have a holistic approach where we zoom out and get an integrated look at how we work at it.
Hi and welcome to the newest episode of Urbcast. I'm glad to be here with the Landskab Architecture series after the summer break. It's just very exciting to do it again, to again meet with inspiring landscape architects here in Copenhagen where I live. However, I also want to expand outside of Copenhagen and Denmark. So if you think of any other potentially inspiring landscape architects, let me know so that I can grow the series beyond Denmark. And today I will be talking to Line Stybe Vestergaard, who is partner and landscape architect at JUUL FROST Architects. And this is actually the second time that JUUL FROST Architects are coming up to Urbcast. Around 2 years ago, I've been talking to founder of the office, Helle, and you can find the link to the episode in the episode's description. But today we'll focus on landscape architecture and we'll discuss the offices and Line's approach, as Line was the one who was founding the landscape and urbanism department here in the office. She is also the part of an editorial board of the trade magazine called Landskab, meaning landscape, and that's why we are also discussing her observations on the industry as a whole. How is the landscape architecture in Denmark growing? How is it developing? And why Denmark actually has a lot of work to do, even though it is known to be a very sustainable country. We'll talk about that later into our discussion. So, without further ado, welcome to the newest episode of not only Urbcast, but especially the Landscape Architecture series, this time with Line. So I would like to say, Line, welcome to podcast.
Thank you very much.
It's very nice that we could start and kick off the new episode after a break. The summer break, which was, I think, well deserved. But the landscape architecture is the topic that was really on the agenda for me this year. The landscape architecture series is about talking to different landscape architects in Denmark, but not only, about how they work and what are those different approaches of different companies here in Denmark to landscape architecture and designing of the public space. We are here in JUUL FROST office in Refshaløen in Copenhagen. And I would love to get to know your story about the office and also the landscape architecture, or maybe especially about landscape architecture. So, Line, could you just very briefly introduce yourself and your connection to landscape architecture, and how did you get involved in this fantastic field?
Yes, I'm a landscape architect and partner here at JUUL FROST Architects. I was starting at the firm as an intern for 17 years ago, and I have taken the travel to get a partner. I have a little other way of being a landscape architect. I have taken my step and fight for going that way I was going. I was not lucky enough at the first to start at the architect school, so I was studying at DTU, and I become an architect engineer. And therefore, I was taking the fight to get into the architect school to take my master, and I was the second one who was starting to take the master directly after an engineer. The dream of being an architect has been something I have wished for since I was in the early of teenage, and I think the dream was starting together with my childhood friend. We have this dream of she should be an artist and I should be an architect, and we have nearly a place at my parents and her parents where we were working and drawing and painting and building different things and have all these ideas of what could become. Luckily, she is also a very new artist today, Hannah Toshiki, and have just have her own exhibition out here in Refshaløen at Contemporary. And I'm lucky to sitting here today and have drawn a lot of amazing projects over the years.
Very close to the Contemporary Art Museum.
Yeah, exactly. So I was also visiting when she was putting up the exhibition. But then I also think the feeling to nature and always been drawing and has been a big part of my childhood. I have been writing a lot. So I have developed the landscape for the horseback and imagining all the woods and fields over the year. Part of me have also been a scout for many years, and it's a part where you learn about the nature and the different landscape, but also where I've been traveling out to see the world together with the scouts and see the kind of different landscape and nature places. And then my parents always have very big dream of showing me and my sister different cultures and different kind of way of living and different kind of nature. And so we have a big view on how the world could be. So we have traveled a lot, and it has been very long traveling over many years since we were small kids. So I think the nature and landscape have been a part of me always. And then I was going from more a city planner when in the start, and then it's become more and more landscape. But I think the landscape has been my background all over since I was a little kid.
And can you tell us more about landscape architecture within JUUL FROST? Could you define more about your journey into establishing landscape and urban department here? Because you've been very heavily involved in the process of bringing this discipline here.
Helle and JUUL and Flemming Frost, who started the firm for many years ago, they have also have this idea that the landscapes should be a big part of our firm. But yeah, it's right. I have been, in a way, taking the development of the office a more specific way of working with landscape. So you can say the way I work and the way JUUL FROST work with landscape is nearly the same, because as the way I'm a partner today, I have taken this development and how we're working. And it has always been kind of our DNA here at the firm to take our starting point in the landscape. We always look at the landscape and with big context, even if we work with different kind of scale of project, because we are not only landscape architect, we are also buildings, construction and architects here at the firm. But we always start reading the landscape and look at it and what is this area we're working in, so we get the site-specific place and the story about this. And in a way, we say that the landscape is the thing that binds together all the things we're working with, but also here where we can solve some of the big issues we're standing over this time in the society with the biodiversity and climate change and social crisis. And in a way, you can see you need to invest in all the things between the houses and in the landscape to make something and solve some of those problems and make a better future. So even if we're making a building or a little house, we always zoom out and say, okay, what should this have the meaning in a bigger circle, you can say. And therefore we say we have a holistic approach where we zoom out and get an integrated look at how we work at it. And if you go more down to the firm, then one of the big thing we're working with, and you also have talked with Helle before, is that we focus on the better health culture of well-being, and how could we with our project just do a little bit better for how the world could be. So I think even if we're going to make the big plans or master plans that we also do, or we make a city area with some housing and neighborhood, or we make it a little square, we look at how is the urban health here, how could we go change it a little bit, make it better for, and with a focus on the physical, but also the mental health in the area. If we go see how we concrete is designing, because I'm mostly a designer and is the one who get the idea and draw the big lines in many of our projects. I need to feel the place on my body. I need to go out on the place, make a lot of site visits sometime and try to understand what is this kind of landscape, space, urban situation we are standing in. Analyze it and also find the special history in over time. What is its change over time? What is the history of the area? But I also use my hand drawing a lot to develop a place. I think, as you know, if you write in hand, you say you remember and learn the things better. I also think that when we handwrite, in a way we develop and learn the site much better, and herefrom we better can make a lot of quick sketches, make the concept, and it's a way playing the ideas through. And then we can use the computer as a firm, but I also think you need to take the drawing out of the computer and handwrite over it again. So for me, it's important that you get this interaction with the site so you can make a special history and get the history out of the site to see what could the design be in the third future. Therefore, I think we have a very gentleness in what we do. And in a way, you can say, I think less is more. How little should we do that we do not need to make a lot? Sometimes it's difficult to do at what you only need to do and find the precise thing. And then I think we have a lot of focus on what can we reuse on the site when we're working, especially with the landscape. What is there on the site? Is there some materials we can use, but also the soil? We have made a lot of projects where we have worked with the soil on the existing site, because we're also working with the architect and they're going to take a lot of soil away when they're making the building. And therefore, I think it's the best idea if we can use it on the site and make a new landscape. And therefore, we have a big focus on how could we make added value. So if we need to solve a thing very technical, how could we make something added to this recreation part in it? And then I think sometimes the best ideas is coming when you have obstacles in the project, because then you need to think on another way and get your head around and try to think differently and out of the box. And that's sometimes the best project in the end.
Which of those elements would be the most unique to JUUL FROST? Because you are part of the editorial board of the Landskab magazine. So you are also looking at the kind of the whole development of landscape as a profession. And from my perspective, landscape would appear as a very important element for different offices. There would be like architecture offices that would start to work with landscape, and they would open the landscape department as well. You also did it many, many years ago. Yeah, you said that there are many ingredients to that. So would you say that there is one which is like the most unique in your work?
I think one of the unique things is the storytelling. I think it's the most important that you can do, is to kind of way describe the place and get a story that you can tell. And there's also the way that you sell the dream to the one who should buy the project or build the project. If the story is good, then it could go from the idea and concept to the construction side. And the constructor could also see, okay, it's going to be this. And I think that is one of the main things we are very good at here, especially with the Landskab project here. And one of my special issues for how we work with it. And therefore, I also think that you need to understand the site very specific, but the storytelling is one of our main topic.
You shared some material with me before, and one of the proud quotes you have is that you take your starting point in the local context and site-specific potentials to secure a sense of place and sense of belonging. I know that there are also several projects that you developed, and maybe we could just mention some of them. Personally, I like the one which was the renewal of the Reventlows in the central Copenhagen, which was a square addressing the needs of urban mobility. But also you have the one of the former airbase in Vellose at the Filmhusene, the film houses. Could you say briefly how would you integrate your thinking in those projects?
Because I think, in a way, you can say the two projects you suggestion is also some of them. I think it's very good to tell the story telling, because Vellose Airbase is a part of a big project where we have made a part of it, where we have made a landscape, but also some new townhouses. And here the focus was on the neighborhood and how could the neighbor get a community, and therefore the townhouses draw in a cluster, so they have nearly an inner circle where they can meet each other, and where they park their car is also where they go into the door, and therefore they say hello to the neighbor and so on. But also that we have the focus to access the green, so we have opening between the townhouses. But I think one of the best thing here to tell the storytelling is that the design of whole pattern in the landscape is taken out of the camouflage pattern. We use that to make a different kind of spaces in the big space, different kind of heights in grasses and bushes and trees and so on. So you give kind of different spaces. But also here we take care of the water, because all the water from the houses and the surface is going on the ground. So we move that along. And here we use this softness in the design. And the storytelling is also, this is just a housing project, but it's going to be, has gone to be a very special place where it could be a very special neighborhood social life that could be. And in the middle of this, we have a little playground where there's landed airplane where the children can play. Normally, it's not something that's going to build to a site that's just a townhouses area. But the storytelling was, oh, okay, then we need to have this in the spaces. And on the parking drawing, then we have also make the fly, the F-16 flies draw, so that you can hold with your car over it or just next to it. But I think that is one of the projects where you can see the storytelling is folded out. And I think it's important to say that our approach is not independent about the scale, because this is not a small project, but it's small townhouses in a little landscape. And we have used also all the soil here to make a new landscape and make all the water going down to two new lakes. And in the end, the water will be clean through these areas.
That's like a flagship project for you, because you also got a prize, the Landesing prize, for this one in 2020.
Yeah, it's nice that people also think it's a nice project, but it was a very fun project to make. And also we were allowed to take it the whole way and follow up also where I was on the construction side and have the talk with the one who's going to build it. And I think, therefore, the history is also important, because if they can understand what idea we have as designer, then they also much better can build it, but also come to idea, how can we make it much better? So I think this connection between process with different people over time in a project that will take many years is amazing. Also, it's the traveling for the project. But then you also talk about Landskab. It's a very special project, and also it has been amazing to make a project just in the middle of Copenhagen, a place nearly everybody who's visiting Copenhagen is seeing or living in Copenhagen.
But we are moving from the countryside in the first project to
exactly.
the
now
very
the
center
middle.
of the Copenhagen.
Yeah, now we're in the middle of the city next to the central station. And before there was a backside on the central station where nearly nobody will come, because it was not nice, and it was very hard life that was going on here.
Just for the record, to some of the people that are not aware, Copenhagen Central Station would have this kind of front face, official face, and then facing the Tivoli Entertainment Garden, which is a very important place. And then you would have the backside, which was shady and unwelcoming, and you would avoid using this one. And that was also my impression when I came to Copenhagen one of the first times, and I used the back entrance. It wasn't nice.
No, it was not nice, and it's not very safe before. And therefore, the idea was to get the central station a new front side, because the neighborhood is coming from this side, and it's Vesterbro. So we like to connect the neighborhood and have focus on that, but also make the square as a social glue between the people who is going to visit the station and taking the train and fast going through, but also the neighbors who are living in the houses just next to the station, going down just to go out to Handel or something, or shopping, sorry. Or then there's in this area also a very big part of vulnerable people, and it was in the design a big focus of making it should be a square where everybody could be, but also that everybody could feel safe when they were here. It should be possible to place your bike, because here is space enough that we could make 600 more bikes parking here. So with much more light, and move all the bike out from the houses in the middle, then you get this way that you can see all the things. So there's no places to hide anymore. And then we take the story about, okay, what is the story around this place? It's a very historical building that we are building up to, but also some of the old building. And it has a very nice material of stones. And then we have the history about the railway with all the metals and so on. So it's very simple and very delicate way of using the materials. Small heights in how we make this island for the bike parking. Then in a way we have tried to manage the people as parking here, and then they can walk around, and it's going to be now a square where you can also just take a quick standing and say hello to everybody, but also where now you enter Vesterbro, who's a very nice neighborhood on a nice way, but also facing the historical building, and it's going to show that for everybody.
It is an important project because it is very central, and as you said, it's this welcoming gate to the Vesterbro district, straight from the central station. I didn't know it's your project.
Was one of the main thing I would like to tell about it, because it's a very urban project and a very known project, but I don't think everybody knows who's making it.
I know it for some time, but when I first saw it, I had no idea who designed this square. And
then we are in the middle of Copenhagen, so the identity is also very Copenhagen with all the materials and so on. So I think it's nice that the space is also a little quietly, because the building is so magical around it. So, yeah.
As we discussed already, you are part of the editorial board of the Landskab magazine, which translates to landscape, and is maybe not the only, but I think the biggest magazine about landscape architecture here in Denmark. And since you are working on portraying different projects and also landscape architects, I was very curious about your impression and your experience with landscape as a discipline here in Denmark. How do you think it evolves over the years? So also the projects you are writing about, do they change? Are they becoming better? Is landscape architecture as a profession in Denmark heading towards right direction?
Yeah, because I have been a part of the editorial magazine for the last 4 years, and I love very much being a part of it. And it's going to give me an insight of the core of the landscape field. But in a way, I also think we stand up a lot, because we have a big history of landscape architecture, and we have some of the biggest back in the time who have made a lot of amazing projects. So I think as a newer landscape, you stand on a history, and therefore we also have a very nice way of talking and developing and designing a landscape. But I think in a way before it was more focused maybe on the garden and the garden culture and also some of the big plant, but now the landscape is going to be a bigger part of the city. And how could we integrate the nature much more? Because some of the problem we are seeing around with climate change biologically is going that we need to take the nature and the landscape inside the city. And therefore, I think that's over the last 3 or 4 years is happening a lot with our core. It has been developed a lot, and we got much more to say. And therefore, I also think it's more important to be a part of this editing and develop article and talk about with different people what could be the theme that we should go into and be as a team of all landscape has a focus on and be better to take care of. Maybe how should we work with the soil in the future? How could we make work with plants that are more homemade in a way or from Denmark, Danish nature? But also what should be our way of developing our involvement and strong voice as a landscape architect in some of the big discussion. And I think it's amazing to be a part of this team and sitting with very different people and talk about that, but also that we, in a way, had this amazing. It's Christina Capetillo who's taking care of this, and she's very good to see what is going on in the field around, but also that we are going, all the people from different study studios, university, municipality is coming here, and we are meeting 8 times over the years and talk about what is going on in the field now and what could we see could be important to set focus on, and where maybe should we move a little bit to how we look at the landscape in the future.
Is there abundance of the landscape projects in Denmark? Or would you say that there is enough work for landscape architects?
I think we still have a lot to do. And I think, but I think it's amazing to be a part of now because many just normal people is asking a lot from us and is setting focus on it. So I think we have a lot to do. Yeah, still. And we have also a lot to do still to make it much better, especially here in Denmark where we have so much field and production side. Because how should we take care of our country over the time? And we have one of the biggest biodiversity crises in Europe, here in Denmark. And in a way, we think we are the best, but maybe we should try to look at ourselves with new glasses and say, okay, how could we do this better and be the front runner again in thinking about the landscape that we were for many years ago. I think we have a job to do.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's Copenhagen or Denmark as a country is having this brand of being very sustainable, and it's something that you export and people come here and of course on the surface it is a very, I would say, yes, sustainable in many ways. But then when you think about how much gas emissions are here or how many people are actually consuming a lot as for such a small country, yeah, there's a lot of work.
A lot of work still to do, but I think maybe in the city with something, we are amazing how we have bike lanes and bicycle tradition for many, many years. But now I think we need to say, okay, this bike lane tradition have also cost a lot of city trees. And maybe it's the next problem. How could we connect those two things? Because in a way, we are not a city with old trees. So I think there's a lot of difficult situation that we need to talk about and find much more nicer way to design in the future.
especially that I don't find personally Copenhagen being a very green city. And of course, this is also geography. Denmark is not such a green country if it comes to forest, for example, right? Like forest coverage is only about, I think, 10 to 15%, which is not a lot. But yeah, so there is a lot of work to be done. And that's how I would like to open up the last part of our discussion, because I would like to talk about the overall inspiration, because there's a lot of work to be done and there are new landscape architects coming to the field, to the profession. There are also landscape architecture students and adepts. So I really would like to pick your brain and ask about some of the hints and tips that you could share with them, how they could navigate with all the challenges in the field we have. And here, of course, we could also mention some of the other thoughts I had for this discussion. So how to make sure that the landscape we design is having justice, and also in terms of measuring the impact of landscape. Yeah, but these are just some of the thoughts. But you have like open floor to share some of the thoughts you have.
I think one of the first thing I would like to say about the inspiration, I think it's a privilege to work with something like this business, but also there's so many challenges that you can work with and crises with that we stand in. So go for it. There's a lot to work with, and keep the dream for what you want to do if you are younger people, because it was hard to me that I didn't become a part of the architect school at first, but then I started as an engineer, and it was amazing opportunity to see some different kinds of way, and also get me a technical thought. But I also take this fight up to end up at the landscape school. So I think even if you go a little bumpy on the road, then the dream can be what you want. And then I think use and be and always hold on to be curious is one of my main reasons to be inspired. When I was finished at the architect school, it was in 2011, and it was a little difficult time in Denmark to get work. A little bit easier for if you were an urban planner, if you were building architect. We didn't know what we were going to do after finished. So we very fast start a test space, we call it, for architecture, landscape architecture, 4 students together. And over the next 5 years, next to our different work over time, we make a lot of competition all around the world. It's very easy if you are young and just do it for fun. And it's also a social way of still see your the people you have studied with. And then you can make a focus and say, okay, we didn't do an answer on all the things, but we like to be better on this. And we were lucky to win a very big competition in the north of Norway. It was a chance that gave us to also travel around the world and use some of the money that we won there to see the world and see each other, but also make a lot of new competition. And then I have chosen here last 4 years to be a part of the editing magazine, as you said, because I'm curious, and I'm also curious out of my office what is going to go around in the core of landscape architecture around me and be a part of that. So I developed in this and be a part of writing a lot of article to the magazine, and planning some of our study trip. We have been around in nearly all the places in Denmark, so we also know what is Denmark, what is the landscape around in Denmark, so we can see some of the problem, but also what is the special if you're on Fyn, if you're on Sjælland, if you're on London, Falster, and so on. And then we have had some workshop where we get better to different things, and it could be regenerative gardening or better to writing and so on. So it's also a way for me to get some new to me and develop my core on another way in just making the project. And then go traveling. You see a lot when you travel, and it has always been a big inspiration for me to see different nature places, wildlife, city around. Now we talk about you have been in Japan, and I have been there for 4 years ago. I think it was amazing. and get a lot of inspiration in how we develop our design also here in Denmark.
Definitely. I've been for some time in Japan, and that was very eye-opening. And I think it's great to kind of get out of this very European or Denmark-centric perspective, because here, as I said, like this series and the podcast is mostly focusing on Denmark and is listened to primarily in Europe. But there is so much outside of Europe that we should be aware of and we should be inspired by.
Just inspired, but also see how lucky we are. Our life can be here. If you're traveling in Africa, I've also traveled a lot there. And there's just much more different between people. And I think it's very important that you see this different and also know, because we are not only working with projects in Denmark, we have done a lot of projects in North, but also other places around the world. And therefore you need to know what is the difference around the world. Use your hand drawing. I use it a lot when I'm traveling, just to relax and take a break. See and have time to recognize what is the special here, because when you sit and draw, take a long time instead just taking a picture. I'm also liking to take picture a lot. I think in the whole thing I'm very people who like to memory also with pictures, but it's very nice sometimes just to take it very slowly, and therefore you also feel the place and the different kind of landscape.
It's hard to connect with a place for sure. I also realized that, like just going and taking photos with your iPhone, and yeah, it's hard to connect.
Yeah, you need to take some time to get it in. And I think the drawing could be one of the things for us as architects, because we also use it professional. Hope that you also use it as an inspiration. Then you said something about how could we measure some of the different...
If you have any thoughts about that.
I think it's also given a kind of inspiration. You can say, okay, it's nice to know what you are doing, have the effect or have an impact of people, but also the nature and the environment. And therefore we have a lot of research projects where we have developed our own added value compass that we use when we are planning and making an urban planning project, where we set up some special criteria, try to say, okay, what we like to this area, and we can measure over time. One of our other main thing of doing our project is also this research way to connect with university and use some of their knowledge in our project. So we, in a way, stand on a better knowledge to do the right design. And we have made a big park in Odense called Pulsparken, where we have used the University of Syddansk University, SDU, and they have this SOPAC system. It's a system for observation, play, and recreation communities, because this park was designed that people should be more active, get together, get more physical and interaction over time. And they have made this measuring over for 1 year ago after the park was finished. And then they think to do it after 5 years, only 3 years old now. And it's very inspiring that you go to have a feedback. Okay, our design, we were thinking, and we have the connection with the university and their practice and what they have developed in as a ground to make the right design, and also see if it was working. And it was very, very nice. And then Værløse, I told you about before, after 3 years making this big landscape project with new lakes, we have a biologist that was counting all the plant and animals. It was just a field before this airplane area with only grass all over. And now we could see there was much more life that they both thought there could be over 3 years. And it's just amazing to see, okay, the thought we have has a good way of making more life out here and a bit more biodiversity in the area. It's also because then it's an inspiration to work further with this design materials in the new project, I think.
To be aware of what you design with and for in terms of the results, I think that's something that I would take with me as an inspiration. And you said that it's important to connect with a place, with a space, and memorize. And you mentioned hand drawing. And I think another nice way is also to read. And that's why I would like to ask you for a book recommendation. Something connected to the topic, something maybe about landscape architecture.
I read a lot, but also sometimes just to take my brain off and take a break. But of course, also some of the book is something with landscape architect. But I was thinking about 2 books when I had this question from you. And it's one of them is Eva Tind, who has written. She's an architect, but also one who's write novels, and it's Citronbjerg, this citrus mountain, and it's a very nice story about a woman who is not knowing her grandfather who's living in Korea, and she's living in Denmark, and when he is not here anymore, she is going to get his house, and therefore she's traveling to Korea and have never been there out and come to Seoul, to this big city, and find a car and drove out in the mountain far, far away and find this amazing little house on the hillside. And the story about the houses and the architecture is amazing, but also about the landscape. And it's different. It's 7 different pavilions. They're standing on the hillside, and the landscape is changing with this special trees with citrus. That's only in very special seasons they're coming. And it was just the feeling that I gave when I was in Japan also. So I think it's a very nice story that you just get a nice story, but also get some inspiration and how you see and work with landscape and architecture, and also put your building in the landscape so they have a special feeling. And then the other is much more heavy one. It's Walk Landscape, Distance and Engagement. It's called Walking, Thinking and Making Landscape. And it has been one I was given when I was just finished my study from my aunt, who's also an architect, and has been one of the books I have used for a lot of inspiration over time, because it shows how you should go out in the nature, how you are drawing. Now I just show you some, but it's amazing to see just the picture and the drawings in this one, and you'll see the process is how developing a design. And I think sometimes it's difficult to find a book where you see the thing that we do when we're designing. And of course, I think you should read, but sometimes it's also nice to see picture and drawings, and how could we work with the concept and developing and use our way of working. And it has been one of my main reasons. And then I think Folk Landscape making some amazing landscape project around the world.
Oh yeah, that's for sure. I should interview them as well, actually, when I think of it now.
And then they have some very nice, how they have going out in the English landscape and see how is the field landscape with this special small wood planting areas, and they stand on a specific way in the landscape, and then they use this in the city next to it to make the square, so the landscape and the city is talking together to each other and so on. And I think that's very inspiring if we are one of them who's designing and is used to drawing. Then I could recommend this book to be one of the one you have on your table and look in sometimes.
I will add the links to the books so you can check it yourself, maybe buy or study more. And for now, I wanted to thank you very much, Line, for joining podcast and joining especially the Landscape series. It's been a big pleasure learning from you and talking to you, and I hope that the listeners will find it inspiring as well.
And thank you very much that I could be a part of it. I hope it could be an inspiration for somebody out there.
I hope so too. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to the newest episode of the Landscape Architecture series, together with Line from JUUL FROST Architects. If you enjoyed the series, please share this episode with someone that also might enjoy listening to this topic, especially if they are starting with landscape architecture, because I really want this series to be very educational. That's why we are talking about some tips from Line towards the end of our discussion. Also, feel free to suggest the next guest, inspiring landscape architect from Denmark and beyond. And I will talk to you soon in English in 2 weeks, but also if you are understanding Polish, I will talk to you next week already. Talk to you soon. Thank you and good to be back.